Once again, let me welcome you to my channel. So today we'll be doing a chapter called The Rat Trap, written by Selma Lagerlof. A rat trap is a trap for rats. The basic theme of this chapter is the essential goodness in a human being can be awakened through love and understanding. Now, it follows this assumption that every individual is generally good. However, it is only situation and circumstances which force or compel him to act badly. So, there is always a chance of his transformation. He can always transform himself and become a good person, and that will be possible only through love and understanding. In class 10, we had done a chapter, Long Walk to Freedom, written by Nelson Mandela. So there also you must have encountered this line that man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. So this also generally speaks about the same idea that this flame of goodness that is there in the human being can be hidden for some time, can remain hidden for some time, but we cannot completely put it off or extinguish it. With this, we begin the chapter, The Rat Trap. A slight introduction of the author, Selma Lagerlof. Selma Lagerlof was a Swedish writer whose stories have been translated into many languages. A universal theme runs through all of them, a belief that the essential goodness in a human being can be awakened through love and understanding. So we have already talked about the theme. So most of the stories that Selma Lagerlof writes deals with the same theme, that a transformation can take place in an individual through love and understanding. This story, the backdrop of this story, that is set amidst the mines of Sweden, rich in iron ore. So the setting is an iron mill, and the country is Sweden, which figure large in the history and legends of the country. The story is told somewhat in the manner of a fairy tale. Now, we know how fairy tale begins and ends. Fairy tale begins with once upon a time, and it ends with and they lived happily ever after. So this story also follows that fairy tale style. Now, we'll begin the chapter now. So what I'll do is, first I will read the para by para I'll take it, I'll read the para and then I'll go for the explanation. So once upon a time, there was a man who went around selling rat traps of wire. He made them himself at odd moments from the materials he got by begging in the stores or at the big farms. But even so, the business was not specially profitable. So he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. Even so, his clothes were in rags, his cheeks were sunken, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. So the story begins with a man who moves around from place to place selling rat traps. Now, he made those rat traps himself from the materials he would get by begging, and sometimes from big farms and stores he would collect the materials. And although he would sell these rat traps, but this business of selling rat traps was not profitable for him. And in order to survive, or in order to keep his body and soul together, sometimes he had to resort to begging, and sometimes he would also resort to stealing. We can easily see his condition we can see his condition, that his clothes were torn, his cheeks were hollow, and you could see hunger in his eyes. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond. Vagabond also means a person who doesn't have a home and who moves around from place to place, okay, and pitches his tent wherever he goes. Who plods his walks, who walks along the road, left to his own meditation. But one day, this man had fallen into a line of thought which really seemed to him entertaining. He had naturally been thinking of the rat traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that the whole world about him, the whole world with its land and seas, its cities and villages, was nothing but a big rat trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits for people. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork. And as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed in on him, and then everything came to an end. Now for the explanation. Naturally, he was finding it difficult to keep his body and soul together, and life was very, very depressing. It was sad and monotonous for this man. So one day, while he was walking along the road, he was naturally thinking about the rat trap that he was selling, and suddenly one idea struck his mind. What is this idea? This idea is that he started considering or comparing the whole world to a rat trap. Now we know that inside the rat trap, people put cheese and pork in order to lure the rats. And once the rats enter the trap and they touch the bait, that is, they touch the food, okay, whether it is pork or cheese, then the trap closes in on him and there is no escape. Likewise, the peddler or the vagabond felt that the whole world can be compared to a rat trap. The world also offered things like riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork. And as soon as anyone let themselves be tempted to touch the bait, it closed in on him, and then everything came to an end. So some people are tempted by the riches that are there in the world, some are tempted by the joys, some tempted by shelter, some by food, some by heat and clothing. So whenever they are tempted and they happen to touch that bait, the trap closes in on him and there is no escape. So we see that interesting line of thought that the peddler or the vagabond falls into is he compares the world to a rat trap. Now, uh, this is a very, very negative and a cynical view of the world that he has taken. Uh, and the world had, of course, now we continue. The world had, of course, never been kind to him, so it gave him unwanted joy to think ill of it in this way. It became a cherished pastime of his during many dreary ploddings to think of the people he knew who had let themselves be caught in the dangerous snare and of others who were still circling round the bait. Now, why did this man take such a negative view of the world? The reason is that the world had never been kind to him, so it gave him a lot of joy. Okay? Unparalleled joy to think ill of the world by comparing it to a rat trap, and it became one of his favorite pastime. So during many tiring walks, he would think about the world as a rat trap, and he would also think about the people he knew who were circling around the bait or who were tempted and were about to touch the bait. And as soon as they will touch the bait, the world will close in on them and there will be no escape. So one evening, as he was trudging along the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. Nor was he refused. Instead of the sore faces which ordinarily met him, the owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. Immediately, he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off such a big slice from his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. Finally, he got out a old pack of cards and played jollies with his guest until bedtime. So one day, one evening, what happens is it was getting dark and he was looking for a shelter. So he saw a cottage nearby and he knocked at the door. So generally, whenever he would knock at somebody's cottage, he would be greeted by sore faces, angry faces. Okay, people would not welcome him, or nobody provided shelter to him. But on that particular night or that particular evening, when he knocked on the cottage, he was greeted in a very, very cheerful manner because the old man who was living in that cottage had no wife or children, and he was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. So immediately he was welcomed, he was provided shelter for the night, and apart from providing shelter for the night, the old man also gave him food to eat, porridge pot, it's a sweet dish. Porridge is a sweet dish. So he gave him sweet dish, and after that he offered him supper, and after supper he provided him tobacco, and they played cards game till bedtime. So we see that the old man in whose house he had taken shelter on that particular evening was very, very hospitable towards him. And not only did he provide him shelter, but he also provided him with food, and gave him tobacco, and played cards with him till bedtime. The old man was as generous with his confidences with his confidences as with his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity his host had been a crofter at Ramjo ironwork and had worked on the land. Now he was no longer able to do day labor. It was his cow which supported him. Yes, that bossy was extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day, and last month he had received all the 30 kroner in payment. So the old man was very, very open and confided in the vagabond. He started telling him about his past. He told him that in the past he was also quite rich. Once the days of prosperity, he was himself a crofter at Ramjo iron work, that is an iron mill, and he had worked on the land. But now, because he had become old, he could not work on the land, and now it was his cow which supported him. But he says that his cow was extraordinary. Okay, cow was extraordinary. The bossy was extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day, and last month only he had received all the 30 kroner in payment. So now he survives by selling the milk and cream of his cow, and this cow also is extraordinary and supports him. And only last month he had got all the payment, or 30 kroners. 30 kroner is currency. Okay, so after telling all these things to the vagabond, the crofter or the old man felt that maybe the vagabond does not believe him. Okay, the stranger must have seemed incredulous, for the old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch which hung on the nail in the window frame, and picked up 3 wrinkled 10 kroner notes. There he held up before the eyes of the guest, nodding knowingly, then stuffed them back into the pouch. Now he felt that the vagabond does not believe him, and that is why he goes to the window frame. He takes a leather pouch from there and opens the leather pouch and takes out the 3 wrinkled 10 kroner notes and shows it to the vagabond. So we see the hospitality of the old man, and how he shares all his secrets with the vagabond, and informs him about how he survives. That is, the cow supports him, and then he is able to get quite a lot of money from selling the milk and cream of that cow. And he also shows the money that he received as payment only last month, that is 30 kroner, 3 wrinkled 10 kroner notes. The next day, both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk the cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. They left the cottage at the same time. The cottage locked the door and put the keys in his pocket. The man with the rat trap said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went their own way. So early in the morning, when they get up, so the old man also is in a hurry to milk his cow, and he feels that he cannot stay in bed because the host is already up, and so he also gets up, and both of them leave the cottage at the same time and leave for their own direction and say goodbye to each other. But half an hour later, the rat trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in, however. He only went up to the window, smashed a pane, stuck in his hand, and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. He took the money and thrust it into his own pocket. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in the place and went away. So after half an hour, What happens is the peddler, again, peddler is also the same thing as a vagabond. He is called by various names, sometimes a peddler, sometimes a vagabond, sometimes a ragamuffin, sometimes a stranger. Okay, so these are all the same person. So what happens is this peddler had already moved out of the cottage half an hour back, but after half an hour he finds himself standing outside the door of the cottage. Now, he did not try to get into the house, so he knows where the money is. So he goes to the window pane, smashes the glass pane, and then puts his hand and gets hold of the leather pouch, takes the three wrinkled 10 kroner notes, puts the pouch back in the place where it was, and then he moves away. As he walked with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. Now he is very happy with his smartness. He felt that he is very smart because he did not have to break into the house. He knew where the money was, so it was very, very easy for him. So he walked with the money in his pocket, felt quite pleased with his smartness. He realized, of course, that he dared not continue on the public highway. He must turn, but must turn off the road into the woods. During the first hours, this caused him no difficulty. Later in the day, it became worse. Uh, for it was a big and confusing forest he had gotten into. He tried to be sure to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and forth strangely. He walked and walked without coming to the end of the wood, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. All at once he recalled his own thoughts about the world and the rat trap. Now his own turn had come. He had let himself be fooled by a bait and had been caught. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs, closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. Now, after stealing the money from the crofter, from the old man, he felt very pleased with his achievement, and at first, he decided not to continue on the public road because there was danger of being caught, and so he entered into the forest. Now, in the daytime, it was okay, but as it started getting dark, the forest became confusing, and he tried to be sure to walk in a definite direction, but again and again the paths twisted and he would reach the same spot. He walked and walked and walked, but he came back to the same spot. And suddenly, this realization dawns upon him that this thought about the world as a rat trap dawned upon him. And now he feels his own turn had come. He was a fool. He was foolish enough to touch the bait. So that means the money which was kept is a kind of bait. And he had taken the money, he had taken the bait, and now the whole world or the forest had closed in on him, and there was no escape. It was like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. So now the same thing that was his cherished pastime of thinking of the people who were circling around the bait, okay, who were tempted by the riches, food, joys, shelter, warmth, okay. So now his own turn had come. He had been tempted by the riches. He had been tempted by the money which he had seen in the crofter's house or the old man's house and had stolen it. And now he feels that he is trapped in the world's rat trap. He is trapped in that forest and he could not find a way out. It was late in December. It was late in December. Darkness was already descending over the forest. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally, he saw no way out and he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound, a hard, regular thumping. There was no doubt as to what those was. That was. He raised himself. Those are the hammer strokes from an iron mill, he thought. There must be people nearby. He summoned all his strength, got up, and staggered in the direction of the sound. So, what happened? Now he realizes that he was foolish enough to touch the bait, and his own turn had come, and now there is no escape. So, as it was getting darker and darker, this increased his danger also, and he was feeling very sad and dejected, hopeless. And finally, he saw that there is no way out, and he feels that his end is near, that he will have to die in that forest. And so when he is about to surrender, he lays down on the ground, puts his head on the ground, and suddenly as he puts his head on the ground, he hears a sound, a regular thumping sound. And there is no doubt in him as to where those sounds were coming from and what those sounds were. Those were the sounds coming from an iron mill. Those were the hammer strokes. Okay, so naturally, when there is an iron mill nearby, people also must be there. So he summoned all his strength and walked towards the direction of the iron mill. Now, lucky for him that he reaches that iron mill. The Ramjo Iron Work, that is this iron mill, which are now closed down, was not so long ago a large plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. In the summertime, long lines of heavily loaded barges and scows slid down the canal, which led to a large inland lake. And in the wintertime, the roads near the mill were black from all the coal dust which sifted down from the big charcoal crates. So now, since he was able to find out that an iron mill is nearby, so he goes to that iron mill, the Ramjo Iron Works. That is the name of the iron mill. So he goes there, and in that iron mill, there was a large plant, a smelter, okay, a large plant, smelter, rolling mill, and forge. Now, these are the things that are there in the iron mill, like forge is a furnace. So, in the summertime, during summer, there was a lot of ships which would come through the canal, and during winter time, as the water level would be very less, the roads near the mill were black from all the coal dust. So, a lot of transport or trucks would also come there, okay, transporting charcoal. During one of the long dark evenings just before Christmas, the master smith and his helper sat in the dark forge. Now he reached the iron mill, and what is happening in that Ramjo iron mill? In that Ramjo iron mill, there are two people. One is the master smith and his helper. So two people are there who are working in the iron mill, waiting for the pig iron. That is, pig iron is raw iron, okay, which had been put in the fire to be ready to put on the anvil. Every now and then one of them got up to stir the glowing mass with a long iron bar, returned in a few moments dripping with perspiration. Though, as was the custom, they wore nothing but a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. So there were two people in that iron mill. One was the master smith and the other was his helper. So both were working on the raw iron and trying to make the best iron possible. All the time, there were many sounds to be heard in the forge. The big bellows groaned and the burning coal cracked. The fireboy shoveled charcoal into the mouth of the furnace, and with a great deal of clatter, outside roared the waterfall, and a sharp north wind whipped the rain against the brick tile roof. So a lot of noise would generally be there in the iron mill. So there would be sound of the bellows groaning. Bellows are a kind of instrument which the people in the iron mill use to blow air into the furnace or fireplace. So there was this sound of the big bellows, and then the charcoal cracking, and the boy was he was taking charcoal and putting it in the mouth of the fireplace. So a lot of noise was there in the iron mill. Outside also there was a lot of noise. There was a waterfall, so the sound of the waterfall was there, and then there was the wind. The noise of the wind was also there, and the raindrops falling on the roof. So a lot of noise was there, and it is probably because of this noise that nobody noticed nor did the blacksmith or the boy. They noticed that a man had opened the gate and had entered the forge until he stood up close to the furnace. So because of the lot of noise that was there, these two people did not notice that somebody had entered into the forge and had come very close to the furnace or the fireplace. So it is the vagabond who had entered. And surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabonds without any better shelter for the night to be attracted to the forge by the glow of the light which escaped through the sooty panes, dirty panes, and to come in to warm themselves in front of the fire. The blacksmith glanced only casually and indifferently at the intruder. Now he is referred to as the intruder, the vagabond or the peddler, referred to as the intruder. He looked the way people his type usually did, with a long beard, dirty, ragged, and with a bunch of rat traps dangling on his chest. So, because of all this noise, the people in the fort did not notice that a person had entered into the iron mill, and it was not unnatural also. Generally poor vagabonds would enter into the iron mill attracted by the light, okay, of the iron mill, or the sound of the iron mill. So it was a daily kind of thing. So they also did not pay much attention. The blacksmith also did not pay much attention to the person, because they know that whoever has come there would like to take shelter for the night and then would move away. And he looked like any other person. Okay, he looked like a proper vagabond only. He had long beard, dirty clothes, and there was a few rat traps which were dangling on his chest. Now this man, the vagabond or the intruder, asked permission to stay, and the master blacksmith nodded a haughty consent without even honoring him with a single word. So the vagabond asked for permission to stay or to spend the night in the forge, and the master blacksmith also has no problem. He doesn't, although he does not say a word, he gives him consent. Okay, you can stay. The tramp did not say anything either. He had not come there to talk, but only to warm himself and sleep. So the tramp had also, this tramp or the vagabond had also no business or no interest in talking to the blacksmith or the helper. He had come there for a shelter and to warm himself and sleep. So in those days, uh, the Ramjo iron mill was owned by a very prominent iron master whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market. He was both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible, and at this moment he had come to the fort on one of his nightly rounds of inspection. Now, this iron mill was owned by a very prominent, renowned iron master. The owner was a very renowned person, and his ambition was to ship out the best iron. And in order to ensure the quality of the iron, he would come off and on nightly rounds of inspection. And today also, he was on the nightly round of inspection. He had come there. Naturally, as soon as he entered, what happened? He saw that tall ragamuffin. Ragamuffin again, same thing, only peddler or the vagabond, different name. A person who doesn't have a place to stay and he moves around from one place to another and pitches his tent wherever he reaches or gets. So this, naturally, when the iron master, the owner, came to the forge for one of his nightly rounds of inspection, the first thing he saw was that this peddler, who had come so close to the fireplace that steam was rising from his clothes. The iron master did not follow the example of the blacksmith. Remember how the blacksmith treated him? The blacksmith did not question him, did not speak to him also, but the iron master was somewhat different in nature. He walked up close to him, looked him over very carefully, then tore off the slouch hat to get a better view of the face. So what he did is, instead of following the example of the blacksmith who did not talk to the vagabond, he goes close to the man who was sleeping. He takes the hat, he takes off the hat and gives a better look at his face. But as soon as he gives a better look at his face, he feels that he knows the person. But of course it is you, Niels Olaf, he said. How you do look? So the master blacksmith, as soon as he looks at the face of this vagabond, he feels that he knows this man. He happens to be Niels Olaf. And he says, how do you look? The man with the rat traps had never before seen the Iron Master at Ramjo and did not even know what his name was. But it occurred to him that if the fine gentleman thought that he was an old acquaintance, he might perhaps throw him a couple of kroner. Therefore, he did not want to undeceive him at once. So the vagabond realizes that the Iron Master has mistaken him for somebody else. But the vagabond does not undeceive him at once, because he feels that if the Iron Master considers him to be an old friend, then he might give him some money, he might throw him some kronors, and that might be beneficial for him. So he does not undeceive him, and he says, or he does not tell the Iron Master that the Iron Master is mistaken. So he tells the Iron Master instead that, yes, God knows things have gone downhill with me, he said. Yes, God knows things have gone downhill with me. That means I am suffering badly. Okay, or I have fallen into bad days. That is what the vagabond says. You should not have resigned from the regiment, said the Iron Master. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. If only I had been there in the service at that time, it would never have happened. Well, now, of course, you will come home with me. So the Iron Master mistakes him to be an old regimental comrade and tells him that he shouldn't have resigned from the regiment. And he also informs him that if he had been there, okay, he would not have allowed him to resign. Anyway, whatever has happened has happened. Now he invites him to his house. Now this is not a very good proposition for the peddler. To go along up to the manor house and be received by the owner like an old regimental comrade. That, however, did not please the tramp. Now, the Iron Master has invited this vagabond to his house thinking that he is an old regimental comrade, a friend. But this frightens the vagabond, because he knows that going to the manor house, going to the Iron Master's house and being received by a friend, okay, is like entering into a lion's den. So he rejects this request. No, I couldn't think of it, he said, quite alarmed. He thought of the 30 kroner. To go up to the manor house would be like throwing himself voluntarily into the lion's den. He only wanted a chance to sleep here in the forge and then sneak away as inconspicuously as possible. Now he did not want anything. He had already stolen 30 kronors, and he knows that if he goes to the manor house, there is a chance of his being caught out there, his being discovered, and it is like entering into a lion's den. He just wanted a peaceful night, sleep, and that is why he declines the invitation. The Iron Master assumed that he felt embarrassed because of the miserable clothing. So the Iron Master from his side tries his level best to convince him. So he tells him that please don't think that I have a fine home that you cannot show yourself there. He said Elizabeth is dead, and as you may already have heard, my boys are abroad and there is no one at home except my oldest daughter and myself. We were just saying that it was too bad we didn't have any company for Christmas. Now come along with me and help us to make the Christmas food disappear a little faster. Now he tries to convince him in other ways also. He tells him that his wife is already dead, his boys are abroad, and his girls have also been married. Only he has one of his oldest daughter who was staying with him. So, and as it was Christmas time also, they were feeling bad that they did not have any company for Christmas. Now this man or this regimental comrade can come along and enjoy the Christmas with them. But the stranger said no, and no, and again no. And the Iron Master saw that he must surrender, he must give in. So no matter how much the Iron Master tried to convince the peddler to go into the house, the peddler denied the request. He said no, no, and again no. Because for him, if he goes to the Iron Master's house, it is like voluntarily going to the lion's den. So he doesn't want to take that chance. It looks as though Captain Von Stale prefer to stay with you tonight, stern storm, he said to the master blacksmith and turned on his heel. So, since he sees that he is unable to convince the vagabond, so he tells the blacksmith out there that it seems that this Captain Von Stale wants to stay with you tonight. So, and then please take care of him. And then he turned. But he laughed to himself as he went away, and the blacksmith who knew him understood very well that he had not said the last word. Now, after that, as he was unable to convince the man, so he moves out of the forge. And while moving out, he laughs, and the blacksmith knows the nature of the iron master very well. Okay, this laugh indicated that the iron master has not yet surrendered or exhausted his attempt. It was not more than half an hour that they heard the sound of carriage outside the forge, and a new guest came in. But this time it was not the iron master. He had sent his daughter, apparently hoping that she would have better powers of persuasion than he himself. Now, after half an hour, there is another carriage. A carriage comes into the forge, and this time it is not the iron master. It seemed that the iron master had sent his daughter to convince this man, because he might have felt that his daughter has better convincing and persuading power than he himself, and so he sends his daughter. She entered, followed by a valet. Valet is an attendant, okay, a helper. So she comes to the forge along with an attendant carrying in his arm a big fur coat. She was not at all pretty, but seemed modest and quite shy. In the forge, everything was just as it had earlier been. The master blacksmith and his apprentice were still sat on the bench, and iron and charcoal still glowed on the furnace. So the iron master daughter comes in, and she is followed by an attendant, and everything is going on as usual in the forge. The blacksmith and his helper, they are working. And what was the vagabond doing? The vagabond had stretched himself out on the floor and lay with a piece of pig iron under his head, and his head pulled down over his eyes. As soon as the young girl caught sight of him, she went up and lifted the head. The man was evidently used to sleeping with one eye open. He jumped up and abruptly seemed to be quite frightened. Now, the vagabond had been sleeping there in the forge. So the daughter of the iron master came. She goes there to the vagabond, because her father had naturally informed her that he was an old regimental comrade, an old friend who felt embarrassed to come to his house after his invitation also. So she was sent, and then she comes and takes off his hat. And as soon as she takes his hat away, the man feels frightened, and she realizes, and the iron master's daughter realizes, that most probably the man was afraid. So she introduces herself. She says, "My name is Edla Wilmanson," said the young girl. "My father came home and said that he wanted to sleep here in the forest tonight, and then I asked permission to come and bring you home to us. I'm sorry, Captain, that you are having such a hard time." So Edla Wilmanson tells him that her father had gone home and told her about him, and that is why she had come here, and she feels sorry for him that he had fallen into bad days. She looked at him compassionately with a heavy eyes, and then she noticed that the man was afraid. Now it seemed that the daughter of the iron master had a better convincing power, or a better understanding of human life and nature, because as soon as she looks at that man, she understands that this man is frightened. Either he has stolen something, or else he has escaped from jail, she thought, and added quickly, "You can be sure, Captain, that you will be allowed to leave us just as freely as you came. Only please stay with us for Christmas Eve." So she realized that this man was either frightened either because he had stolen something, or he had run away from jail. So she gives an assurance further. She says that do not have to worry. You will be allowed to leave our place as free as you have come. But we want you to come to our place and enjoy the Christmas Eve with us. Now she said this in such a friendly manner that the rat trap peddler must have felt confidence in her. So he accepts to go to the manor house. It would never have occurred to me that you would bother with me yourself, miss. He said, I will come at once. So he accepted the coat, and then he gets into the carriage and goes to the manor house, or goes to the house of the iron master. But while he was riding up the manor house, he had evil forebodings. Now, although he was going to the iron master's house, but he had evil premonitions. Why the devil? Now he started regretting. Why did he steal the money from the peddler? Or sorry, the old man. Why the devil did I take the fellow's money? He thought, now I am sitting in a trap and will never get out of it. Now he realizes the mistake that he has committed, but once committed is committed. He cannot undo what has been done. So, although there is a sense of remorse, there is a sense of regret on having stealing the fellow's money, but there is nothing he can do. Now he is trapped in the world's rat trap, and there is no escape for him. The next day was Christmas Eve, and when the iron master came into the dining room for breakfast, he probably thought with satisfaction of his old regimental comrade whom he had run across so unexpectedly. So it was Christmas Day, next day, and the iron master was also very, very happy that now he will get his old regimental comrade. Okay.